Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here. Myself, Mehul Darooka, and of course, I am amongst these eminent personalities, Dr. Manisha, Saxena, and Mr. Randhir, Khare. The topic today that we're going to be talking about is cultural legacies and memories, the sense and sensibilities. Of course, हम जब छोटे थे तो हमारे दादा, नाना, नानी, दादी, हमने बहुत किस्से सुने हैं. हमने सुना है कि कैसे हमारे खान पान में, मेडिसिन्स में, अदर एरियाज ऑफ कल्चर जो हम इम्बाइब करते हैं एज अ जनरेशन, और हम जो वो वी फॉलो दोज rituals, we follow those traditions, we follow those cultures. And in every area, fortunately, we have something to talk about. Such a huge, rich tradition that we have. And not only in regards to our culture or our, religion, it's also from the world over. And I have Mr. Randhir Khare, who has had an opportunity to imbibe multi-cultures across the world. He has been raised, brought up in India, but he has had the fortune of facing these multiple cultures across the globe. So I'm sure he must have a lot of things to share with us today, and so has Dr. Manisha Saxena through her books, because she has carried stories of various countries. Her characters have moved from one place to another. So therefore it is very intriguing for me, at least as an author, because I have had 5 books published. I know how it is to kind of bring in that kind of authenticity, and one prime way of bringing that authenticity is through your culture sensitization. How do you imbibe that? How do you show that? How do your characters play that? From where do they come? What background do they come? So that is what we are going to be talking about today, and we have a huge, I'm very excited. So let me first go ahead with you, Dr. Manisha, and welcome to this panel. And I understand that, the perception of cultural legacy in a broader term, what is it in your opinion? How do you perceive it if we talk about literature? Do you think that it has some relevance? And how does literature really shape up when you are talking about cultural legacy? Can you please let us know about it?
Hello. Thank you, Mehul ji. So, as authors and artists, I'd say that we use cultural legacy as an artistic tool. Because when I was a little girl, I remember, and that time we generally had English writings from writers of the West. We had very few accountable writers of that is in Indian English writing. I think Khushwant Singh was there, Salman Rushdie had just started at that time, and I'm talking of 1970s, and some of the other writers were there. But most of the English writing at that time was from the authors of the West. And as a little girl, I was fascinated, while reading the novels by Bacon's and Sausages. At that time, we didn't have the easy availability of such kind of food in the market, or leave alone at homes. So now you have every nook and corner, you have all types of, the next, as soon as I grew up and I got the first opportunity to taste the Bacon's, I tried, and even though I liked it or not, it's a different matter. But that is the thing, that how cultural legacy is swept into your text of the novels. And I'd say it has a very wide meaning for authors in literature. Like it is not only the food, not fashion or style, it is the architecture, sculpture of a place. Even if you go to the abstract sense, there wars have left legacies of pain and suffering. So many novels or books, fiction and non-fiction, have been about how the pain and sufferings of world wars, or any war for that matter. See, such kind of things, the abstract things, the pain, suffering, power, there are power stories. That is also a legacy which is carried on in families, as we have seen in several kingdoms or even in democracies. So cultural legacies plays a great great role in being used as an artistic tool by the authors and writers. That is my point of view. And even in medicine, see, when you read, and they inculcate some sort of compassion within. So if we are reading tales of pain and pain, then some sort of compassion is evoked within the readers. So in a sense, as I said about the bacons and the sausages, some kind of acceptance among people who are even far away from your own culture, they tend to accept such kinds of food. So I feel that cultural legacies are a great thing to be pursued and to be passed on to the next generations, so that people of the next generations, they are very much aware of their past, their rich cultural past, and they, if not possible the entire thing, they at least carry some part of it into their future.
Well, that is really good, and I completely second that thought, because it is important, and as I mentioned in my introduction, it is imperative that
that becomes a unifying force of sort.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Randhir sir. You and I had a chat, and we spoke about the different cultures that you have imbibed all your years, and if I may say so, it's been English, Scottish, Irish, Spanish, French, and Indian. So these are the various cultures you got exposed to. You probably have had a lot of cultural heritage coming from there. So how do you really would, if I have to ask you, how would you cope up with these various cultures' sensibilities? What was it like?
Actually, it's not really a matter of coping with it. You're actually living with it. Because all my grandparents, my 4 grandparents, are from double culture, 2 different cultures. So together there are actually 6 different cultures I have been born from. Wonderful. Okay. Now, as a child, since you were talking about children, as a child, I was very confused. It was confusion as, who am I? What is my heritage? Because this is just post-independence India, and we had children from all cultures sitting in the class, and finally they went home to their respective countries. So in the beginning the teacher said, okay, all the English stand up. So I stood up quickly. Very good. So after a while, all the French here stand up. So I stood up also. But she started getting a little worried. The third question was, are there any Spanish children here? I stood up again. And this went on, and then she said, are you having a joke with me, young man? So I said, no. She said, no, you're having a joke with me. And then when my father came to pick me up after school, she asked him, he said, yeah, what's wrong with it? No, how is it possible? So when I was small, I didn't really know who I was, culturally speaking. So when you talk about any type of memory, cultural memory, any single memory, anything, I didn't know. But what I did know, that I belonged in a bubble. And this bubble of, of a cultural mix, which didn't belong anywhere at all in post-independence India, floated across the country, and I was growing up in this bubble. Yeah? And slowly from the bubble, people were vanishing, friends were vanishing, going home, and so, and then I was left. So, what was I, who was I, how was I going to cope with it, was my big issue, and has been my whole life issue. Okay, now I don't want to go on, because maybe you want to know some other aspects of how I coped with it and what happened.
Certainly, sir. Certainly, if you could briefly even mention it right now.
All right. See, I discovered that since I am English and I am Irish, all these cousins and relatives still write to me, and I'm Spanish, but I'm not really all of that. I feel, because of the nature of what I am and what has made me a writer, I feel much deeper than all of that, much deeper. And that my heritage goes back really very far. That was my single Indian root to my paternal grandfather. Yeah? And he fought, he was a criminal lawyer, fought only for the rural poor and the marginal communities. And that's what attracted me, and that's what took me to tribal India.
Wonderful. So we would love to know more about it, sir. I would want the audience to kind of hold on to that thought, and would love to
we could come
move
back
on
to
to
it.
that. So, Manisha ji, I understand that you have had 2 books published so far, Natal Fault and Blue Jeans. And I also understand that your Blue Jeans is a high voltage thriller and it is set in Goa. And I would love to know what has been your process while you were shaping those characters and, having your plot in place. How did the cultural thing, are you like familiar with Goa, or how did you get those authentic cultural legacies into play? What was your process? Did you happen to be there and, experience it for yourself, or how did you go about it?
Thank you, Mehul ji. A very interesting question. I feel that especially to, weave a fiction, because when we are writing about non-fiction or travel stories, we have been to that place and we just narrate our thoughts and we jot them down, we chronicle our travels. For weaving any fiction, you have to be very authentic and you have to be sure that you are not knitting a story which sounds out of point, and you have to be very honest to the characters of the place so that they seem very much of that belonging to the land. So, Blue Jeans, and we writers, as you'll agree, if khas karke fiction writers, because we work on a nudge. I had a dream while promoting Natal Fault. People asked me, what's your next project? But I was never sure about that, what will it be? And I was always in love with thrillers, reading them since very beginning. So one day I had a dream of this very beautiful blonde. I have not been very fortunate like Randhir Khare sir, who has such a great cultural heritage, and and in that dream that vision was there, and someone said, and the inner voice said that she should be the central protagonist of your novel. Now, for me, weaving a fiction around a beautiful blonde, I have also been traveling across India and some of the foreign countries also, and so I best placed her as a tourist in Goa. Now, when I placed her as a tourist in Goa, I just brushed the history of Goa and found it so interesting because it had a Portuguese culture which was quite different from rest of India, and there were even the food, culture, everything is quite different. All of the people who have been to Goa must be realizing that Goa is entirely a different culture from rest of India. So I placed her as a tourist, and being a doctor and passionate about thrillers, I wove a murder mystery around her, placing her as a protagonist, and then I brought in several things which are which belong to Goa. Like there's a music known as Fado, and the singers are known as Fadista. Probably some must be knowing. That is a dying art today because we have very few Fadista these days. So that is brought into the novel. As I said before, authors, they use cultural legacy as a tool, artistic tool. So while weaving a story around her, I have through the novel, there's a central, there's a Casa Rio, which is a Portuguese mansion in the story, which is a 450-year-old mansion, and there's a murder mystery around it. So the description of Casa Rio itself, how it had the red balcaus, which are very, they are very Portuguese in nature, and the food, bebinka is the sweet dish which is found only in Goa and not at other places. So all those things are incorporated into the novel bit by bit, and gradually I was fortunate to weave a fiction with the twin stories intertwining in this, and somehow it clicked with the audience.
Okay, okay. So it took you a while to kind of,
Yes, and I had been to Goa several times, so I was very much familiar with the culture of Goa and the locations of Goa. So I imbibed all those within my novel. So step by step, the fiction started building up. Nothing was planned beforehand, but as it is, that things just started to flow spontaneously. It was not a conscious effort, but things got into place bit by bit, and the fiction built up.
Well, that has paid off really well because your book is doing so well. So it was weaved really smartly, and you have definitely put in that authentic element. Otherwise, without which it may not necessarily appeal to the larger audience that we are targeting.
I had to take care of the names and surnames of the characters also, because normally we don't encounter, that kind of population elsewhere. So everything is, I have tried my best to be as authentic as possible. And rest is for the readers to gather.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Now here, Randhir sir, I would want to shift the focus a little bit to the Generation Z, Gen Z as we call them. And like when I was growing up, my mother particularly ensured that me and my sister, we follow the traditions and the cultures that we belong to. Anywhere we would be, she always, made us, bring us up in that particular thing, and would always make us aware that these are your roots, these are your legacies, this is what we carry forward. It's your choice whether you want to take it forward or not, but it is, you should know. That was her, the way she thought and the way she has brought us up. Now, I also understand, sir, you have spent a good amount of time in education, and you are a current director of Rewachand Bhojwani School and Junior College. So, and plus 50 plus years is what you have invested your life in this domain. What do you feel, sir? Are students able to carry forward that cultural legacy, not only at their, in the schools or colleges that they belong to, but even at their home? Is that something that is a concern, or is it happening? What would you say on that?
Yeah. See, it's like this. We leave the concern out because we come to an issue called relevance. Is it relevant for that child, or is it not relevant for the child? We, as our generation, may be concerned that, oh, they should be following a certain legacies and they should be following certain traditions. So, in our school and junior college or whatever, I have introduced various, how would I put it, various regular ceremonies and happenings which actually draw from different Indian cultures. And so so they're going along, we don't tell them, okay, now, this is Hindu culture or Muslim culture. Ours is a very, very cross-pollinated culture in the school to respect all beliefs and everything. So what we've done is we've gone one step back, and nature has become very important to the school. So it's a very small campus, tiny campus, and yet when the school begins, at the beginning of every academic year, we have the blessing of the trees. Yeah? And the children make up prayers and songs to bless the trees and thank them for everything they've given us. Now that trees and nature is intrinsic to almost every single Indian identity, cultural identity or not. That was one. Two is the value of respecting all faiths. So we have a school prayer, and the school prayer is in different languages. It's a school prayer, yes, you could call it a prayer, from different languages and beliefs in India, and we sing that as a school, we chant it as a school prayer. So we're inculcating in our children over the last 27 years the legacy of tolerance, of inclusion, of acceptance. Yeah? So the next thing is we have encouraged everyone and tell them that, listen, you are born special. You contain the universe, you contain the truth, like all our religious beliefs are, that whatever there is in the world is actually in you. So self-discovery, self-celebration, and self-assertion is an important part of the school curriculum, and we have created subjects of that nature. This includes the parent community, so we have courses and sessions for the parent community. So we try not to, I as director, try not to give weightage to any one religion or belief, and try to be able to create or encourage or enrich a children's life that they grow up into tolerant, accepting, inclusive children.
something that they imbibe and they follow.
Exactly, absolutely. Because we can't take charge of another child's beliefs or family beliefs or whatever. But by and large, let me tell you, to answer another part of your question, homes are falling apart. Many homes, not all, many homes in cities are falling apart when it comes to central core religious or, ceremonial beliefs. Are falling apart because it's becoming more and more and more irrelevant. People are finding it irrelevant. So it's very difficult. So you go somewhere to do a puja because you have to go to do a puja. A lot of Christians I know, my mother was a Catholic, and she would religiously go every day to church. But there are many people I know who will go because they have to go and come back. From my Irish roots, the Irish are famous, all the guys are famous for going to church, and they stand outside the church smoking a fag, a cigarette. So when it's time to communion or something, they'll stub out their cigarette, go and get communion, come out and go to the pub. So religion then becomes merely a habit. So if I feel institutions of learning have an opportunity to enliven and enrich children's lives in a different sort of way, and not a parochial way, as this religion or that religion or this belief, but more in terms of an awareness and a harmonious way of living with each other.
Certainly, sir. Certainly. I completely second that thought. But, do you, as a follow-up question, because I'm intrigued now, so do you think that the parents are probably, for the Generation Z parents, they are not probably putting in that extra effort to ensure that, it's just not a habit, but they pick something worthy of their own self. It kind of creates an identity. Of course, religion is not the only basis to do that, but an overall shaping up of their children in terms of what their roots are and how they should be, and a value system that is there, So is there a less effort on that?
See, I'll tell you, it all comes down to economics. See, in most cases, both mom and dad are working, and you can't blame them because school fees have gone up, this has gone up, that has gone up. They have to support themselves. So less time for children, less time for that quiet chat with your children, to sit around, to worship, to do anything, much less than before. And that means, therefore, that core fabric of the family has been torn apart.
So that's basically what they need to.
Yes.
So it is a concern. If correct me if I'm wrong, but
absolute concern.
It is a concern, and these things need to be corrected. Yes, they are both working, and in the times that we are, it is imperative that both the genders get that equality, and they are able to together move forward. And because of that, somewhere unknowingly or unwantingly, the children are ignored, So it is important, because with what I see, I hate to call this, but I am no longer a Gen Z now. But when I see Gen Z, they don't really connect with what our legacies have been, what are things. Like a simple thing like our freedom fighters. Now the sentiments that you and I may have for them, probably they may not have. Is it as a country we are disassociating them with all these things, and we are more focused on the rat race, the competition, the technology, the movies, whatever you call it? Are we pushing them there unwantingly and unknowingly, or is it something that we ourselves are not caring about कि अब वो ज़माना गया, अब हम क्या करें, अब हमारा टाइम अलग था. And as growing up child, I've been hearing this since हमारा टाइम वो था. अब मेरा टाइम वो आ रहा है कि मैं आगे वाली जनरेशन को बोलूँ कि हमारा टाइम ये था. So where is that disconnect? Why are we not able to give that? Independence Day has just become a holiday today for Gen Z. There is absolutely zero sentiment about it. I hate to say this, but this is a brutal fact. I don't want to sugarcoat things. But why is it like that? Today, I have been taught and brought up, and my school environment was such that we understand and realize the kind of sacrifices our leaders have made. But today's Gen Z, with due respect, they don't realize that. What would you say on that?
Actually, this is a very serious note. But on a lighter note, I'd like to say that everything is not, not as bad as it is shown. Because, there are 2 points to it. Why the children these days, they do not have that much of regard for these holidays and all, because they have not seen the genuine struggles. While we were growing up, our senior generation, our parents, some of them belong to the generation of freedom fighters. So we had that kind of culture and that kind of things running in the family, that now the commercials have changed, as sir said, cost of living has changed. So the culture has definitely changed, but all is not done. See, 15 or to 10 years ago, when we went to weddings, most of the people in Indian weddings, they dressed up in suits. But now, ethnic wear is more popular. Even young kids and even young adults, they love wearing ethnic wear for the weddings. Young girls, they love wearing lehengas, saris, sharara is back. So we should, on a lighter note, I was saying that when you say such kind of things, that in our days, and that day, you turn old. Why our days? Our days are still here. Okay, that's on a very light note, of course. So we should not blame everything to the younger generation, because I find that the spark is still there. The role models, the brands who are promoting ethnic wear and culture, while we were in lockdown, the families were closed up in their homes without any house help and all. That time, my daughter and children in other homes also, I saw, they learnt cooking a lot. And I saw how my daughter, she has a greater knack for cooking than myself. I mean, she would devote her time to cook all those recipes that she learned from her grandmom. My mother-in-law is also here. And I saw that she has an interest to learn all those recipes which I wouldn't have attempted, only for the sake that, it's so tedious to cook. So when they are exposed to that kind of things, they derive a interest for the thing, and then they go ahead with. So likewise, why Independence Day? Because they are disillusioned, I feel. The leaders this day, sad to say, these days, they are not up to the mark as we had our freedom fighters and the leaders of the bygone era. So that itself diminishes the push towards the even elections, politics and all. Younger generation, that is, they are disillusioned. Only the ones who want to project themselves as leaders, only those kind of people are coming into politics. The rest of the younger generation who really have that ability to govern the country, but they are putting their energies into their careers to go ahead. So the times have changed, but the priorities have changed, but all is not dead. I feel that if the role models and the brands who are promoting culture in some sort of way, it's not necessary that you imbibe and carry on the whole thing, as sir suggested, that many of the things have become obsolete. And it's, we cannot, of course, carry on the end. When we go to the rituals, when we consider the rituals, take for example any puja, all the customs, of course, they are not necessary. Even we feel, our generation also. So if even some part of it can be carried on and given to the future and can be carried on further, I think cultures will still hold on.
Well,
so I am very optimistic about that.
Well, we'll leave it at that positive note. And coming back to you, sir, you spoke about different cultures and, the different things and that, real funny incident that you just narrated some time back. So at home, sir, how was it like? And pertaining to food, because I'm a big foodie, so would love to know that pertaining to food, what was it like? With what beliefs and cultures and food habits did you really grow up with, considering you had these multi-cultures?
You're talking about the international food and...
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, see, the post-independence India that I grew up in, there were two distinct paths to it. Okay? One was whichever area you were living in of the country. If it was Bengali or it was Uttar Pradesh or it was Rajasthani or whatever, that culture prevailed strong. The other culture was a hybrid and a mixed culture, which wasn't any less, which had a vitality, which had an energy, it had an exuberance. And the English, the Irish, the Portuguese, all of these people had a great presence there. And they were not less because they were mixed in any way. And so the foods were there was always a riot of a variety of foods. And as the capacity of Indians to absorb and Indianize, a dish or a food and make it Indian, add the Indian tarka into it, add the Indian masala into it, and very soon it changed, just like you have the Chinese Indian,
Chinese samosa.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have this, at that time it was a little purer and it was very interesting. So we knew that when we were young we were going to X person's house, we knew we were going to have an X type of cuisine, X type of desserts. And unfortunately my mum, for example, my mum was largely Spanish and little less English. Her dad was English and her mum was Spanish. So she tried to be more Spanish than anything. So there were lots of salads, there were lots of Mediterranean foods, and very slowly, as I realized from when I was 2, 3 years old, 4, 5, 6 years old, it became Indianized. Indian vegetables came in instead of the outside vegetables because they were not available. You go to the market, you'll find an Indian, you'll find a bhindi there, you'll find a Karela there. So what do you do with that? So there was a lot of inventiveness, a lot of changes began to happen. So we grew up in an atmosphere where there was a lot of experimentation with food. And we were very open to various cuisines, which helped me later in life. To wherever I traveled, even abroad, wherever I traveled, I could eat whatever I got and not feel it strange, because the tongue has got used to variation. And I think and food is a great experience, and it's very, cooking of food and eating of food is inspirational.
Absolutely. And this, here I would like to bring back the discussion that we were having a while back about the tribal community.
Yes.
And I understand that you have translated a lot of their work, their songs, their poems.
Yes, I translated, particularly with the Bhil. I did 25 years of work with the Bhil community. Yeah.
Absolutely. So how was it like, what impact do you think culture has had over their lives? And so with your as well, how was that experience? Because you have traveled extensively to the every corner of India,
yes.
And you have been with the tribal community for a very long time. So what would you,
see, I'll tell you the basic situation then and is happening now is the reuse of land. Earlier, land was sacred. You ask the Katkari community, who were traditional hunting and gathering communities, you ask them today about which piece of land do they own, they'll possibly slap you, because they don't believe you can own land. So it starts from there. So whatever they grow would be fast growing, quickly, because they know they'll plant a banana tree, they know when it fruits, it will go. So that is the wisdom of such communities. And like the Bhil is a great survivor. The Bhil started off in South Rajasthan, and through pressures of time and history, they were pushed down into western Madhya Pradesh, northern Maharashtra, South Gujarat, and wherever they went, they picked up a language. So they mixed it with Bhili and they survived. They mixed the cuisine in Bhili and survived. Like the Bhils of Dang district of South Gujarat speak Dangi, which is a combination of Gujarati and Marathi, and they've added Bhili to it. Okay, so I feel that they, to a great extent, valued land and the sacredness of land. So their places of their sacred places were not temples, were not churches. There were no construction. It was the land that was considered sacred. Some old grove of trees, they still exist, and they would pray there to whatever the Devi or the Deva, whatever was there. They would pray to them, and they would actually perform miracles, and I've seen it happening. Yeah? Now, all of that is changing. Those old trees are getting cut down. That space which they used once as cattle grazers is gone. You look at the Dhangar starts from Sholapur with his sheep and his goats,
Right.
and he passes through Pune and goes along to the river. And on the way, they used to stop at various people's farms, Pingle's farms then, and all the others, graze, have a relationship with the people around there, and move on. There's no place to graze. So, we have actually changed their lives by changing the use of land.
So it has kind of added value, and it's been a win-win situation.
Yeah, and I have a great affinity with them because I feel that I have a very ancient spirit and I actually belong somewhere else before, and that's why I can cope with so many cultures, Spanish, English, Irish, you name it, I can cope with it because I'm none of them. I belong to tribal communities.
That's even more commendable, sir, coming from such ancestry and such kind of culture, heritage that you had. You kind of, really merged well with the tribal communities. You were able to be with them, be one of them, and that comes across, in your experience, which is great. So it has it, like what is their general, scheme of things with life? What is it that they generally look up to?
See, they look up to the value of keeping your word. That's most important. All communities, the Warlis, the various Bhagats, the various people, you tell them you're going to do something, you're expected to do it. And in the cultures we live in today, urban cultures, nobody keeps their word. That's one thing which is common to all of them.
That's really wonderful, the commitment aspect that.
Exactly. Actually, it's the honesty, really.
Well, great, sir. Thank you, sir. And we will soon opening question answer session. So we look forward to some questions from all of you. So my last question before we open the panel, Manisha ji. So you are a doctor and you have been, practicing medicine since a while now, but you write fiction. So how is it like, how do you get into, do you introduce characters pertaining to the medical field, or is it like something that, your imagination goes wild, despite being a doctor, you are able to think like a normal, writer,
Yes.
So how's that journey been like?
I think fiction is my forte, and I love imagining things, concocting things, placing them. I like a jigsaw puzzle and bringing them, joining the dots and all. And sir would be pleased to know, in my latest novel, Blue Jeans, one of the characters, though I have only, she is only built up from my imagination, fiction. But Amelia Rodriguez, the central character, one of the characters of my novel, she has a Indian mother, British father, and a Portuguese husband, and again a British bahu. And I was so happy that I had created such a character, and she really, my readers also loved putting such a variety. Now I came to know about you, and I'm really pleased that sir has such a, rich cultural past to come in contact with such kind of person. So for your question, as many of the doctors have quite made a mark as a fiction writers, like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was there, Anton Chekhov even went on to the extent of saying medicine is my first wife and literature is my mistress. Of course, it's a very controversial statement to say publicly. Then we have Michael Crichton, who wrote this Jurassic Park. We have Robin Cook with his medical thrillers. So as a doctor, of course, I think for being a fiction writer, it's not necessary in what profession you are. It's more of your passion that comes into play. And as doctors, some of the things, of course, they are on the positive side, on the advantageous side, that help us, like we are trained in forensic sciences, which is all about death and evidence. So naturally, when you are weaving a fiction, you need to be very sure about, suppose you are putting a murder mystery, so what could have been the cause of death, how could the evidence be reached. So that kind of knowledge has been applied in the fiction. And of course, as doctors, we are taught to be compassionate, and as writers also, we are compassionate. Only then you can be dedicated to your work. So I feel there's nothing stopping the doctors from writing fiction or writing any, putting forth any creative work for that matter. So that's how I think, and both my works, Natal Fault and Blue Jeans, they have undercurrents of medicines. Like Natal Fault is a multi-layered fiction. Basically, it has a present, contemporary part, a classic part, because it starts in...
What is this natal fault? Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
what is this natal fault?
Natal is basically a medical, it is derived from medical terminology, and natal means birth. And normally birth is to be celebrated. So where lies the fault? So natal fault is something, it is a generic idea behind that multi-layered fiction, and there are several stories weaving around it. So how the birth becomes a fault, that is, suppose someone is born in a very privileged family, we have that is born with a silver spoon in his or her mouth. But what about the children who are born in the underprivileged family? So that becomes their natal fault at that time. They have so much struggle to reach a certain level. Everybody is, and we are not sure. We are born where we are born. Our birth is not under our control. It is, we are God's creation. So, but still we bicker about it. Of course, that I belong to this country. There are two warring nations, though they are neighbors, but they are two warring nations only because they belong to different countries. So that is where natal fault comes into play. Because you belong to that country and you belong to the other country, you are across the borders, you are enemies, that becomes your natal fault. So likewise, in natal fault, I have used this terminology for several things, like underprivileged ones, for warring nations, because war is also there in natal fault. About the period, like sir said, you said that we had a great regard for public this Independence Day and Republic Day and our freedom struggle and patriotism. But these days the culture is dwindling. So that might be the natal fault of the kids born to this generation, probably because they have not been exposed to that. So that terminology has been used in different manner in the fiction to weave the fiction.
Well, thank you so much. You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, it is passion that matters, irrespective of what profession you are in. If you are keen, you want to write, you are passionate about it, you believe in your concept, things will start happening, you know. So thank you so much for that. Now I would pause here and, you know, request our lovely audience, if you have a question for our panelist, you're more than welcome. Anything that you want to ask behind the topic, our cultural legacy, traditions. Yes, ma'am.
I am grandmother of 6-year-old child. Now, as you have said, their parents are working. Now we are the bridge, and fortunately, the age has increased. So that is why we have a great privilege that we have energy and we have studied, and now we have retired from our active life, and it is our advantage that we are connected with our grandchildren. But now the problem, since you are saying friction. So I have grown up with a reading of Panchatantra and Birbal and all those. Now my grandson of 6-year-old child, he is learning Goku. Arre baapre, I have got that book. First off, everything is reverse. That book itself starts from the end to start. There are so many characters, and the friction is too much. 50% human, 50% और कुछ oh my God, it is beyond my concept. I cannot get connected with my grandchild at all. And he is into Goku and I am into Birbal. So what shall I do? As a grandmother.
So what your question is basically what should be your stand? You know, how do you kind of get things into flow? Okay. Maybe Randhir sir, do you want to take that?
We have this situation all the time where parents and grandparents are completely out of sync. Forget about stories. Out of sync with their children and grandchildren. That's the reality of the age. So you have to find common things that would connect you to them. Okay, so what doesn't connect, leave it aside. What can connect, pick it up. If going to a park, going on a picnic, going out somewhere, playing with a pet, doing something else connects you, that will do. See, that's the point. And we always feel that there's a conventional way of connecting with our grandchildren is the only way, that, okay, we sit and read a book, right? But what book? If you suggest a book, your grandchild would say, no, that's not what I'm interested in. So you have to find something else that connects you. And forget about the book. You know, literature won't be ruined if you forget about the book and do something else with the child. You know, play a game, a board game, or do something. And outdoors, let me tell you, it's been proved that outdoors is the greatest healer. You know, and there's a term which is called nature deficiency, which has been caused by inadequate exposure to nature. And you have children who, are restless, children who are not able to concentrate because they're all the time indoors, all the time away from nature. Nature releases the senses. All the 5 senses are awake through exposure to nature. Try that, and I guarantee you you'll succeed.
Well, thank you so much. Any other question before we wrap this up? Anything from? A lot of culture is already inherited, it seems. There are no questions about it. Well, thank you, audience. Thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure to have you guys here. And thank you, Dr. Manisha, and thank you, Randhir sir, for talking to me today. And I thank PILF on all of our behalf to give us this opportunity. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.